I'm gonna sing till my heart starts changing. Oh, I'm gonna worship till I mean every word. 'Cause the way I feel and the fear I'm facing doesn't change who you are or what you deserve. I give you my worship, you still deserve it. You're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy of my song. I pour out your praises in blessing and breaking. You're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy of my song. I'm gonna live like my King is risen. Gonna preach to my soul that you've already won. And even though I can't see, I'm gonna keep believing that every promise you made is as good as done. I give you my worship, you still deserve it. You're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy of my song. Pour out your praises in blessing and breaking. You're worthy, you're worthy, Jesus, you're worthy of my song. You're worthy, you're worthy, Jesus, you're worthy of my song. You're worthy, you're worthy. And in the blessing and the pain, you are worthy. Whether you say yes or no or wait, you are worthy. Through it all I choose to say, you are worthy. I'll never stop singing your praise. I'll never stop singing your praise. And in the blessing and the pain, you are worthy. Whether you say yes or no or wait, you are worthy. Through it all I choose to say, you are worthy. I'll never stop singing your praise. No, I'll never stop singing your praise. When I finally see your face, I'll cry worthy. When you wipe these tears away, I'll cry worthy. Above every other name, you are worthy. I'll never stop singing your praise. I'll never stop singing your praise. Oh, I'll never stop singing your praise. I'll never stop singing your praise. I give you my worship, you still deserve it. You're worthy, you're worthy. Oh, you're worthy of my song. I pour out your praises, blessing and breaking. You're worthy, you're worthy. Jesus, you're worthy of my song. You're worthy, you're worthy. Jesus, you're worthy of my song. You're worthy, you're worthy. Forever you're worthy of my song. You're worthy, you're worthy. Jesus, you're worthy of my song. You're worthy, oh, you're worthy. Yeah. And when I finally see your face, I'll cry worthy. And when you wipe these tears away, I'll cry worthy. never stop singing your praise. I'll never stop singing your praise. I'll never stop singing. Never stop, never stop.
Hey, welcome to Prairie Lakes Church. I'm Cody, the digital pastor here. And before anything else, we need you to hear that we're a no matter church. What that means is no matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, or even what's been done to you, we need you to hear God loves you, and you can go on the journey here with us. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to clean yourself up to be here. We're really glad you're here. And if you're new with us, or maybe you're attending here today and you've been attending here for a while. You've been kind of anonymous. You haven't become known. You haven't been active in the chat. You haven't let anyone know that you're attending here with us. And if that's you, I'd encourage you to take that step in becoming known. Because what we know is connected people are growing people. When you take that step in becoming known, when you ask questions, when you meet other people that are part of Prairie Lakes Church, I know God will use that. So if you take that step, just as an added incentive, I'll send you an Amazon gift card here yet today, just as a thank you for taking that step. So to do that, you can fill out our welcome card, and you can access that by texting PLC to 99581. And a faith milestone that we celebrate here is baptism. And baptism is an outward display of the inward work of salvation. It is putting on display that private faith line decision that you have made. So if you have made that decision to step over the faith line, but you haven't been baptized, that's your next step. So I'd encourage you to just ask some questions, to get signed up. We're gonna have baptisms here this fall and don't want you to miss out on that. So if you wanna learn more about baptisms, you can again text PLC to 99581, and you can select faith milestones and that you want to be baptized. So go ahead and fill out the form. I'll be on the other end to answer any questions you might have. And the next step that we take here is giving generously. And what we can honestly say is we want this for you, not from you. Because we know throughout Scripture, we see examples of God's command for us to be generous, not because He needs something from us, because He wants something for us. He knows when we are generous with our money, when we give up the control that money can have on our hearts, our minds, our lives, that's transformative for us. God uses that to change us, to transform us, to make us more like Him. So when you are generous, God uses that to transform you. He also uses that in ways to fuel our ministry here at Prairie Lakes Church. So if you haven't given, I'd encourage you to take that step here today. So you can do that again by going to prairielakes.org/give, and you can select your campus from the drop-down. That's all from me for now, so let's continue in today's service.
Sometimes things happen to us or around us that really get under our skin. We get angry, even outraged at all kinds of aspects of our lives. People around us, circumstances happening to us, even that driver who cuts us off. But what got under Jesus' skin? What were those things that outraged Him? What were the things that He couldn't just shrug off? What made Jesus indignant?
Hey, welcome to Prairie Lakes. We're really glad you're here. You've made a great choice starting your week off the right way. So I'm really proud of you for making this a priority for you and maybe even for your family and getting here. So really good job. I was in Grinnell several weeks ago now for our 10th anniversary down there. And one of the gals down there, one of our gals asked me, she said, hey, you need to do this more. So everybody ready? We're going to start again. Here we go. Everybody ready? Hey, welcome to Prairie Lakes Church. I'm glad to be here. How about you? Yeah. So listen, we're really glad you're here. Great job. Now, here's what we're doing. We're in this series called What Made Jesus? And many of you are in these What Made Jesus blank small groups. So here's where we've been so far in the series. couple weeks ago, we started with what made Jesus shrug. And honestly, that was such a fun one to do, to look at that in the life of Jesus. And last week, it was what made Jesus marvel. I mean, right? The Son of God, the King of the universe. And he actually marveled at some things that happened here on this earth. And so this week, we're going to take another turn, and we're going to ask this question: what made Jesus indignant? Okay, indignant. Now, before we go farther, let's make sure we're all cleared up on this word, okay? Indignant actually is this: it's a feeling or showing anger. Now, I know this is a kind of a weird word to have. We're talking about Jesus angry, okay? But it's because of something unjust or unworthy. So let's just sit on that just for a minute to make sure we're all on the same page. Because you might be thinking, hey, Pastor John, wait a minute. Isn't anger or being indignant a bad thing or a sin? And then how can Jesus be indignant or angry if he never sinned? And because he could be our perfect sacrifice, because he was sinless, he could actually be the Savior of the world. So how does that fit together? Let's be real clear on this one. Being angry or having the emotion of anger is not a sin. Anger is an emotion that we have as human beings, one of the many emotions that God has implanted in us or given us as part of being human. Here's the issue. The issue is what makes us angry, or what we do with our anger. That's what the issue is. Now listen, you may have grown up in an angry home, or you may have been on the receiving end of an angry person, or an angry parent, or an angry spouse, or an angry coach. And listen, this is different than that, okay? That's the sinful side of anger. And in fact, in the New Testament, they go to some great lengths to kind of make sure we understand this. The Apostle Paul wrote this later in the book of Ephesians. He wrote this: in your anger, do not sin. Now notice he doesn't say don't sin. He says in your anger, don't sin. And then he adds to it, he says, don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. And that's a kind of a scary phrase, isn't it? That anger, if you hang on to it and you let anger become sin in you, it actually gives the devil a foothold into your life. That's a scary thing. James later said this in James 1, and some of you are going to recognize this. We used this verse a couple of years ago. It really became a verse that we prayed out loud a lot. And James says this: my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. It doesn't say don't become angry, but slow to become angry. And here, then he adds on to the anger part. Because human anger, when it becomes sinful, doesn't produce the righteousness that God desires. Okay, so make sure we're really clear. We're talking about what made Jesus indignant, or what made Jesus angry. Okay, so it's not a sin to be angry. It's what you do with it. And in fact, what we're going to see with Jesus is, as usual, he's like the opposite of us. And today, you know, we're supposed to be enraged and outraged by everything all the time. And really, we kind of call that virtue signaling, right? Oh, I'm supposed to be mad at that, so I better say I'm mad at that. Here's the crazy thing. Indignant today oftentimes is virtue signaling. I'm just saying it because everybody thinks I need to say it, but here's Jesus. Indignant for Jesus was signaling his virtue. I think that's a major difference in how we kind of usually respond with anger. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to explore 3 times in the Gospels, 3 times where Jesus got indignant. And we're going to look at why and what and how of each of those, okay? So let's go to the first one, okay? Let's go to the first story that we're going to read. Now, Jesus gets indignant when? Here we go. Mark 10, okay? So in Mark 10, and here's what it says. So people were bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them, but the disciples rebuked them. Now just sit here just for a minute. Get the picture now. So people are bringing their children to Jesus, right? So these parents are bringing their children in, and they want Jesus to bless them, to touch them. They want Jesus to hear his voice. They want Jesus to hear their name. You know, they bring him, which is a great thing. But the disciples not just say, shoot him away. It's not just like, hey, come on, he's busy. It wasn't that. They actually rebuked the parents and the children for coming there, from doing this. And when Jesus saw this, and here's the word, everybody ready? He was, what's it say? He was what? Indignant, right? So he said to them, let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God, now hold on to this for a minute, the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Now, catch what Jesus is saying. He is indignant, and he's actually saying that the kingdom of God belongs to such as these, children. Okay? All right? Next part of the passage. Truly I tell you, Jesus says, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. And he took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and he blessed them. So when Jesus saw what was happening, he was indignant. He was angry at it. In fact, you can dig down a little bit farther in this passage, in the use of this word in the Greek, and it actually kind of has this meaning like so angry that it made him shudder. It made him shudder in anger. Now I want you to see this about the story, right? There's the immediate context. Whenever we read the Bible, we've always got to go, okay, what's before this story and what's coming after this story? Because the context matters a lot in the stories of Jesus. Now, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell this story. Those are the three synoptic gospels, we call them. And so Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell this same story about the children coming to Jesus. And all of them, in Mark 10, in Matthew 19, and in Luke 18, they all follow this story about the little children with the story of the rich young ruler who approaches Jesus. And they put it there for a reason, and there's a contrast between these. You couldn't find two more opposite approaches to Jesus than the children and the rich young ruler. I want you to see this, okay? See this. The little children who have nothing to offer but faith, and the young rich man with everything to offer but has no faith. You remember the story of the rich young ruler, right? Jesus is walking along, and this rich young ruler, we find out, kind of putting the three stories together from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, runs up, drops to these, Jesus, what do I got to do to be saved? And Jesus says, you know, follow the laws, keep the commandments, honor your mom and dad, don't kill anybody. Jesus kind of says, he goes, well, I've been doing those since I was a kid. And Jesus looks at him and loves him. It says he loves him. But Jesus knows what the real problem is. And Jesus says to him, why don't you go sell everything that you have? Because he had a lot of stuff. Because that's in the way right now. And then come follow me. And it says the guy went away sad. He walks away. So the gospel writers put these two stories for a reason. Why this indignant shudder when it comes to children? Because the disciples are missing the point. The disciples are missing the point that grace is the point. And hindering the children coming to Jesus, the very kind of people to whom the kingdom belongs. Jesus said this, it belongs to such as these. These little children are the picture of the kingdom. Not because of all they have to offer. In fact, think about it for a minute. Kids have nothing they can put in the offering plate. Kids don't have the skills to build a building. Kids can't go and be a missionary somewhere. They can bring nothing to Jesus. They haven't earned or deserved anything with him. In sharp contrast to the rich young ruler, right, who has everything to bring, right? He has everything to bring. Entry into the kingdom is by grace and by grace alone. And in fact, this point makes Jesus so indignant that he shudders. Earlier in Mark 9, this one's in Mark 10, in Mark 9, Jesus says, if anyone causes one of these little ones to fall, they should have a millstone wrapped around their neck and thrown into the sea. And that's how serious this is. The point Jesus is making is this, that the disciples are missing the point. The kids are coming with faith that Jesus loves them and gives grace. While the rich young guy brings lots to the table, except the faith to believe that grace is enough for him. Why does Jesus get so indignant? Because this is the point. None of us deserves. None of us can earn. Ephesians 2 says, for it's by grace we've been saved through faith. And it's not by works so that none of us can boast. This is the point. Jesus is modeling to his disciples, listen, you don't earn this and you can't deserve this, but my grace is like a child that just comes and believes, and that's what it is. I know there are a lot of us. I know there are a lot of us that kind of grew up in systems, maybe a religious system or a church that kind of said, well, if you do these things and you kind of check the boxes and you can kind of earn your way in. That makes Jesus indignant. And my friends, when we say step over the faith line and trust Jesus, here's what we mean. You've got to say, I've got nothing to offer. In fact, all I bring is my sin and my faith. And I confess that I'm a sinner, and I surrender to Jesus, and I believe that he's the only hope that I have. And that's how you become a follower of Jesus. Not by bringing all that you have, but by knowing that you have nothing to bring to the table. You see, Jesus gets indignant when we miss that grace is the point. That's story one. So Jesus gets indignant. That. Let's go to the second story together now in the Gospels. Now, this one's in Mark 3, okay? Mark 3. We're going to sit on this one just for a little bit. So it says this, another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see, now just hold on to this for a minute, if he would heal him on the Sabbath. So catch what's happening here, right? So they're in church. They're in the synagogue. They've got the scriptures open, and they're singing and praising God, and they're claiming to be worshipers of God. But what they're doing is they're looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. And catch the next part now. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, stand up in front of everyone. And then Jesus asked them, turning to those religious people who were saying one thing and doing another, which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? To save a life or to kill? But they remained silent. And now catch the next part of this passage. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. I mean, you just read that, you think of Jesus, right? And this isn't a sinful anger, this is a righteous anger. Sitting in the synagogue, and they're using this human as a pawn, and all they're trying to do is plot evil against Jesus while they're thinking they're worshiping God. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. He said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. What does it say? Look at it again. Anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. What are their stubborn hearts? Again, let's let the context around this passage shed some light on the meaning of the passage. Again, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell this same story about the man with the shriveled hand. And they all have the exact same story in front of this story. So just like after the little children's story was the rich young ruler, before the man with the shriveled hand, they all tell the same story. And the story is this. It's the story of Jesus and his disciples walking through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and as they walked, they picked some grain heads to eat because they were hungry, and the religious people, the Pharisees, saw them, and they tried to trap him and say, what are you doing? You're not supposed to pick grain on a Sabbath. You're not supposed to do that. The point of the Sabbath story is this. Right in front of Jesus, they were practicing their hypocrisy. They were trying hard to appear one way while actually living out a different way. They were claiming the moral high ground when they didn't have it. And that triggered Jesus, right? Anger and deeply distressed. The word used but here, the first one had this word of kind of shudder underneath it. This one has that underneath it that has that sense of lamentation. He was bitter to tears at their lack of love for a hurting human while sitting in church, claiming to worship God. Stubborn hearts, they wanted to look good without actually doing good. They wanted to look righteous. That was actually far more important than actually being righteous. They'd rather look right than do right. And in Matthew 23, now Jesus, as you guys all know, this is what Jesus just pounded against. This was the thing, right? And he got anger and deeply distressed at this thing called hypocrisy. And in Matthew 23, Jesus has these pronouncements, and he pronounces these woes on them. I'll give you a couple examples of that. In Matthew 23, verse 23, here's Jesus, and he says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former," right? See what he's saying? He said, you guys are all in on the minutia of the law. And he says, hey, give it a tenth. And what should we teach? Give a tenth, right? Is the right thing to do. But when you do it at the neglect of the justice and mercy and faithfulness, it's hypocritical. It doesn't match. He goes on a little farther down in verses 27 and 28. And again, he says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of bones of the dead and everything unclean." And then catch what he says at the end. Just couldn't be more clear than this. "In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." My friends, Jesus was angered and deeply distressed. They were actually sitting in church, plotting to kill Jesus and do evil against him. Their words and their deeds didn't match up. And man, that made Jesus indignant. Here's the great news, though, for us at Prairie Lakes, okay? Here's the great news. We're not like that at all, right? I mean, we wouldn't fall into that camp. In fact, we at Prairie Lakes, we actually go to great lengths to appear not to be too religious like that. You don't have to dress up and look the part. We talk about that all the time. Or we don't have to talk the same or pretend that we're better than we really are, right? So the picture of hypocrisy that Jesus is, kind of banging on these Pharisees, that's really got nothing to do with us, right? I mean, we don't do that. We certainly don't want to appear a certain way so people will think more highly of us than they ought to. We're not in the camp of I'd rather look right than do right. Are we? My friends, listen to me. Jesus was indignant when the words and the deeds don't match. And while it's easy for us to look at those examples of the Pharisees and say, oh, we don't hold our 10-pound King James Bible out. My friends, we are just as guilty as they are of our own special way of doing this, our own special code of hypocrisy. We say, amen, to loving my little Iowa without really knowing their names or inviting them into anything. We love the idea of a no-matter church, but don't really like it when messy people come in. We love the idea of being a no-matter follower of Jesus without actually practicing it, being Jesus with skin on to real people. We love being talked about nicely, but don't actually talk nicely about others. We want to be given grace and the benefit of the doubt. But more often than not, we don't offer grace and the benefit of the doubt to somebody else. We want to appear to be generous without actually being generous. We want to make sure that nobody in Iowa misses Jesus, but we don't put our money where our mouth is. And for some of us outside the walls of our homes, we're kind and gracious. But inside the walls, we're harsh and critical. We've got our own special code. We're guilty. But my friends, this hypocrisy when our words and our deeds don't match up it made Jesus angry. Angry. And his harshest words were for people who practiced this regularly. So when it comes to the little children, he was indignant that they missed the point, right? They missed the point that grace is really the point. But when it comes to this story, Jesus gets indignant when our words and our deeds don't match up. Indignant. So let's go to a third story now. Okay, and this is kind of the one where all of us were kind of like, oh yeah, that's the one, yeah, I thought you'd talk about that one, right? This is the story of the cleansing of the temple. Now again, I want you to notice that this story of the cleansing of the temple is in all four Gospels, right? In John 2, he cleanses the temple once at the very beginning of his ministry. And then in Matthew and Mark and Luke, he cleanses the temple again on the Monday of Passion Week. So Friday, he's going to be crucified. That Monday, the triumphal entry Monday, that day, he cleanses the temple. Okay, so that's one of these instances right here. Okay, so let's go to it. Jesus entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. It is written, he said to them, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you're making it a den of robbers. I want you to just see something here real quick, okay? When he says this in these quotes, he's actually taking one verse from Isaiah, my house will be called a house of prayer. And then he takes another quote from Jeremiah, but you are making it a den of robbers. So he goes back to the scripture, the Old Testament. He takes a passage from Isaiah, he takes a passage from Jeremiah, and he puts it together to describe what's happening here. Make my house will be called a house of prayer, but you're making it a den of robbers. So this is the kind of no-brainer story, right? We've read it and we look at it. But Jesus shows his cards. What's really happening, what really is making him indignant here, he shows his cards when he quotes those two scriptures. I want you to notice this. He takes these two, makes them into a single sentence. And when you go back to those two passages, here's what they're about. They are about the threats against what the temple was actually there for, what its purpose really was, for the people to find and worship and be with God. The problem wasn't necessarily that they were buying and selling. I mean, that was a bad thing because they were profiting from it and they were taking advantage of some pious pilgrims that were coming in. Yes, that's certainly a part of it, but I think it goes deeper than that. The real problem was where they were doing this buying and selling at, and it says it very specifically. It was in the outer court, and the outer court was the court of the Gentiles. Catch this now. That was the only space outsiders were allowed to enter. It was the only space in the temple that outsiders, non-Jewish people, to engage with God. It was in the outer courts. It was the only place they could. And when they couldn't, it set Jesus off. Remember, the temple of Jesus' day had kind of four kind of courts to it. The innermost part was the Holy of Holies, and that's where the presence of God was. That's where they had the Ark of the Covenant, right? And that was here, and that only the priests, only certain priests could go in there. And then the next court out from that one, the next court out from that, next layer out from that was the court of men. And the next one out in that day was the court of women. And then the outer court, this way out here, was the only place that outsiders could come and worship God. And what these money changers were doing was they were making it really hard, right? They were making it really hard for outsiders to become insiders, for disconnected people to become connected people. They were keeping vulnerable people away from God. I want you to notice this. Jesus loved outsiders enough to risk upsetting the insiders. I mean, just catch what he did here. This is the temple. You don't do anything in the temple like this, ever. And Jesus comes in, and in John 2 it says he turned over the tables and he got a whip and chased them out. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, in the last week, it just says he turned the tables over and he chased them out. He chased them out. He was so indignant that he thought it was worth upsetting the insiders because of what they were doing to the outsiders. They were making it hard for people to get to God. Now, this problem doesn't go away. It's been a part of this church thing forever, and it actually started really early. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the Gospels. They tell the life and story of Jesus, and all of them end with his resurrection and ascension to heaven. The next book of the New Testament is the book of Acts. And Acts is the story now since Jesus died and rose again, and he ascended to heaven, where he sits at the right hand of the very throne of God, interceding on our behalf, by the way. So Jesus is up there. And Acts is the story of the beginnings of the early church. It's the disciples going, now, okay, he equipped us for this, now let's do it. And in the book of Acts, the churches were starting to go, and they were starting to go, and this crazy thing started to happen. Outsiders were becoming insiders. Gentiles, people who were not Jewish people, were actually accepting this Jewish Messiah. They were becoming followers of this Jesus. So Paul and Barnabas were these two missionaries, and the Apostle Paul, right? And so they were out preaching and teaching, and all these Gentiles were coming to Christ. So Paul and Barnabas march into Jerusalem, and they get to Jerusalem, and here's what they say to the leaders of the Jewish church, right? They say, hey, all these outsiders are becoming insiders. And they say, hey, that's great, but you know what? They've got to get circumcised first. In other words, they've got to kind of become Jewish before they can really become Jesus followers. And Paul and Barnabas say, wait a minute, no. And Paul and Barnabas argue about it, and they have a big council called the Council of Jerusalem, right? And after that Council of Jerusalem takes place, Paul and Barnabas lay their case out. James, the leader of the disciples and of the church in Jerusalem, in Acts 15:19, he says this, it's my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. That we should not. Here's Jesus. He was indignant because they were making it hard for people to get to God. And this is why we're a no matter church. People, well, no matter means, well, you guys compromise. Don't compromise. Well, it means sin doesn't matter. No, sin matters deeply. It cost Jesus his life. Well, it means you guys are, no. Yes, we don't want anybody to stay stuck. But we want to remove every barrier that we can for people to find God. We want to be as close to the heart of Jesus that we can get as a church. And what's at the very heart of Jesus? Here's what gets him indignant. Jesus gets indignant when we make it hard for outsiders to see God. My friends, some of this stuff is hard, right? Because I'm guilty. I'm guilty of all three. I am. In fact, let's sit on just for a minute together, okay? I'm guilty sometimes of missing that grace really is the point, and I think I've got to earn it, or I've got to deserve it, or I think somebody else needs to do a little bit more to really get in. I'm more often than not, my words and deeds, there seems to be some space between those, and they don't really match up. I'm guilty. And there are some times I make it hard for outsiders to see God. My friends, listen, these things made Jesus angry. And now that we know about this, let's be the kind of church, a no matter church. And let's be the kind of followers, no matter followers of Jesus, who make sure we don't repeat these mistakes over and over again. Jesus gets indignant when we miss that grace is the point. Jesus gets indignant when our words and deeds don't match up. Jesus gets indignant when we make it hard for outsiders to see God. Let's push away. Let's repent. Let's turn away from that. My friends, there are many of you in small groups right now, and inside those small groups, we have to be able to talk about this. Are there times in my life when I'm a hypocrite? Are there times when I miss the point? Are there times that and we have to be able to encourage and hold each other accountable on this. And I want you to do the same for me. I've got people in my life who call me out if they see this in me. And that's the kind of place that we have to be and the kind of followers that we have to be.
Being angry or offended is a choice. It's a choice that we can consciously make, and it's not a productive one at that. But as Christians, we often try to justify our anger as it being righteous or somehow used by God to further his kingdom here on earth. But the reality is anger doesn't lead to action. Love does. So is there something, maybe one of John's 3 points that you need to maybe repent or apply in your life here? Are you living in a way where you are missing that grace is the point? Are you living in a way that what you profess is not in line with how you are acting? Do your words not match your deeds? Are you living in a way, maybe it's your anger getting in the way of someone seeing Jesus? And so today is a good time to change that. I encourage you to just pray with me here. God, we just thank you for the challenging and convicting message here today. Would you help us to see that grace is the point? Would you help us to take what we believe and what we do and make them align? Would you help us to not be a barrier for others to see you, to see your love, to see your mercy? So God, as we leave here today, would you challenge, convict us, encourage us so that we might be more like you? And God, we pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us here today. Kids, you are up next. Children's ministry is about ready to begin, and everyone else will see you back next week.
What makes you want to say, I quit? Is it one more page of fractions making numbers soup in your brain? One more time dad says no to getting your own phone? Maybe one more PE class where you get picked last for a team? One more time your sister starts the fight and mom blames you? One more broken promise? One more dropped lunch tray? When tough things pile up, it is easy to give in and quit trying. But truth is, you were never meant to push through on your own strength. God knows every single hard thing you're walking through. God knows every moment that feels like just too much. And God offers to carry those heavy burdens with you. When you take one step and another, you find that God can plant seeds of hope inside. Call it nerve, backbone, spirit, pluck, tenacity, grit. Each time you give it another try, when you sit down to study again, or head back out to the practice field, or choose a good attitude instead of slamming the door, you build the muscles to push through. You rest in knowing that God holds the end of your story. God will give you the power to keep going. As you refuse to give up when life gets hard, others can see God at work in you. That's why grit is an amazing way to worship God with your life, because worship is about more than just singing loud. It's all about living loud.
Everything keeps telling me to quit and not go where I'm going. But I'm never ever gonna stop, and there's no signs of slowing. Ooh, now moving backward. Ooh, I'm moving forward. 'Cause you give me the power to never give up. You give me your power when it's more than enough. I made my decision, quitting's not an option. No matter how hard it gets, I know I'm in, 'cause you give me the power. I'm committed to your plan, so I'll follow all of my days. Every day you give me strength to follow after your way. 'Cause you give me the power to never give up. You give me your power and it's more than enough. I made my decision, quitting's not an option. No matter how hard it gets, I know I'm in, 'cause you give me the power. Yeah, you give me the power. Ooh, now moving backward. Ooh, I'm moving forward. 'Cause you give me the power to never give up. You give me your power and it's more than enough. I made my decision, quitting's not an option. No matter how hard it gets, I know I'm in, 'cause you give me the power. Yeah, God gives me the power. You give me the power.
Welcome to Story Lab. This week we're talking about grit, while we take a look at the story of someone with a very colorful wardrobe. Oh, and this happened. Hey, I'm Amaya,
And I'm Zeke.
and we are here to talk about grit.
I think there's some confusion about what grit really is.
Well, grit
Is
is
grit a delectable breakfast dish from the American South?
no, grit is actually
Grit is refusing to give up when life gets hard.
yes, and you need grit whenever you're facing any kind of difficult challenge, like when you're learning how to do something new, like riding a bike or a skateboard.
Or when you're dealing with a hard subject in school like social studies.
Yeah, or science or art.
Art's not hard.
It is if you're not an artist.
True.
Sometimes you need grit just to get through everyday life.
Also true.
So let's put that to the test with today's super cool experiment that uses both science and art. It's magic milk.
1, 2, 3. Let's make it!
We're making magic milk. Tell them what we've got here, Zeke.
Of course, we've got a glass pie plate, food coloring, dish soap, cotton balls, and of course, the milk.
All right, so the first step into turning this regular milk into magic milk is to...
The first step is to open the bottle. Here, you need some help.
No, wait, no, I got it,
Here,
I got it.
just
I got it, I got it.
Oh, no. Wait. No. I am so so sorry.
It's okay. There will be no crying over this. We are refusing to give up.
Yeah, grit.
Paper towels, please?
Yeah.
Ah, resourceful. Okay, so magic milk. Step 1, pour a small amount of milk. All right, is that good?
Looks good to me.
Step 2, squeeze drops of food coloring into the milk.
Do you need any?
No, it's fine, I just... What is wrong with you? You know what? Let's just skip this whole thing. It's time
The
for...
story.
No. Keep going.
Fine, you do it.
Step 2, squeeze food coloring into the center of the milk. Step 3, place a cotton ball covered with dish soap into the milk.
Whoa.
Nice. Let's get that again. You want to know why it happens?
Go on.
You see, whole milk has all these fat molecules, but when dish soap is dropped right into the middle, the soap molecules race around bonding with all the fat molecules, creating a giant swirl of color. Well,
Still green. But now it's time for...
The story before the story.
Today, we're in the very first book of the Old Testament, Genesis. God created the whole amazing world, but people turned away and broke their relationship with God.
still, God had a plan. God called Abraham and Sarah and promised to bless the whole world through their family.
Abraham and Sarah had a son, Isaac, who had a son named Esau and a son named Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons,
Including the next to youngest, Joseph. And Joseph is the hero of our story.
and go.
Hey everyone!
Hey, Ryan.
Oh boy, you better strap in because we are in for a bumpy ride with Joseph. Joseph was second youngest in the family, and he was his father Jacob's favorite son. Jacob gave Joseph a beautiful, expensive, colorful robe. Joseph started having dreams, and he couldn't keep them to himself. He had to tell his brothers.
We were harvesting grain, and all your grain bundles bowed to mine. And in my other dream, the sun and moon and stars bow to me. That's like Mom and Dad and you guys.
Great way to make your big brothers like you, huh? Joseph's brothers were very jealous of him. So when Joseph's dad sent him to check up on his brothers out on the fields, they snapped.
Here comes that dreamer.
Let's get rid of him.
No, don't harm him. Just throw him in this empty pit.
And that's exactly what they did. They threw him in a pit. They were still deciding what to do with Joseph when a group of traders heading for Egypt showed up.
Let's sell him to these traders.
Joseph was sold by his very own brothers. His brothers even lied and told their father Joseph was dead.
No way.
Uh-huh. Can you imagine? Joseph was a teenage kid on his own in a foreign country, sold into slavery. He was sold to a man named Potiphar, captain of the king Pharaoh's guards. Joseph didn't know anyone, didn't speak the language. He could have given up, but God was with him, even in Egypt. Joseph worked so hard and did so well that over several years he gained Potiphar's trust. Eventually, Potiphar put Joseph in charge of his entire estate. Things were finally looking up for Joseph, until they fell apart. Again. Potiphar's wife was sneaky, and she wanted Joseph to do something wrong. When he refused, she threw a tantrum!
He tried to hurt me!
Throw him in prison!
Now, Joseph was on his own, enslaved in a foreign land, and in prison. Yeah, it was time for him to have an epic pity party, right? I mean, that's probably what I would have done. But Joseph was still growing. He'd come a long way from that overconfident kid who had boasted to his brothers. God was with Joseph, even in jail. Joseph still worked hard, taking care of chores, helping other prisoners. The man who ran the jail was so impressed he put Joseph in charge of everything. One day, 2 brand new prisoners arrived, straight from the royal palace. The Pharaoh's royal baker and his official drink taster. Joseph made sure they were comfortable. Well, as comfortable as you can be in jail. But one morning, both of these guys showed up at the breakfast table looking pretty upset.
Why do you look so sad today?
We both had dreams. But no one can tell us what they mean.
Only God knows what dreams mean. Tell me what you saw.
Ah, now we're back to where we started, right? With dreams. The drink taster told of seeing a vine that budded and grew bunches of grapes. And then the drink taster squeezed the grapes right into Pharaoh's cup.
Pharaoh will release you from prison and give you your job back.
Yes!
When he does, please put in a good word for me.
Well, after this, the baker was excited to hear about his dream, where baskets of bread sat on the baker's head and birds ate the bread.
Pharaoh will release you from prison and have you killed.
What? That's pretty awful news to have to give someone. But it happened just as God had revealed to Joseph. In 3 days, the baker was killed. But the drink taster was released from prison and given his job back.
Now the drink taster will remember to tell Pharaoh about me and I'll get out.
So, you think the drink taster remembered?
Yep.
Nope. So, Joseph was still stuck alone, in a foreign land, in prison, forgotten. But even then, God was with him. The end. For now.
Wait. You can't leave us hanging like that.
Yeah, things got better for Joseph, right?
Well, I don't want to give the whole story away, but spoiler alert, God used Joseph in a big way. And fast forward hundreds of years later, God would use Joseph's family to bless the whole world through Jesus. But none of that happened right away.
So, what's our part in the story?
Well, just like for Joseph, there are going to be days when things don't work out neatly for us.
Maybe you missed the bus.
Or you spill the milk. Or food coloring explodes on you.
Or anything bad happens that you don't expect. Even in the hardest, darkest place, God is still with you. Even when you can't see it, God is still at work.
So, we can hold on and keep going.
And choose a good attitude.
By George, I think you've got it. See you next time.
So here's the thing.
Hold on, because God is with you.
And that is what gives you grit.
Thanks for joining us in the Story Lab. See you next time.
I need grit.